it seems that the right hemisphere is aware of the need for the processing that the left hemisphere carries out, if you like, on its behalf. But the left hemisphere cannot be aware, seems not to be aware of what it is the right hemisphere knows. So knowing less, it thinks it knows more. I've discovered in more recent years, in looking at Chinese, Japanese, Indian mythologies, the mythologies of the North American native people and others, that there are these myths which talk about an unequal relationship between two forces, one of which should always be in control of the other. And everything goes well as long as the one that knows less is under the control of the one that knows more. But when this left spirit, as it were, the left hemisphere spirit, starts to overthrow its rightful master, it usurps, then things go wrong, civilizations collapse. This has been, as I say, a constant theme in people's experience of life, expressed in various ways through mythology. And it's also what Einstein reportedly, I don't think anyone can trace this quotation, but it's very much true to his spirit. Einstein's summary that the reason is a valuable servant, but intuition is a precious gift. We live in a world that honors the servant but has forgotten the gift. If I seem to be cheering for the right hemisphere, it's partly because the right hemisphere actually does know more and is more likely to achieve the sort of ends that we would like to see for humanity. And it's partly that at the moment it's completely overwhelmed by the sort of sabotage, by the thinking of the left hemisphere, this mechanistic, power-seeking, control-seeking thinking, which Milton, of course, portrayed perfectly in Paradise Lost. And effectively, the whole point about Satan is that he is resentful and craves power, and that is the undoing of him and of mankind. Another way of thinking of it is that the left hemisphere, which actually is literally interested in tools and machines, manipulating things, is also, if you like, adopts a role which is the one we would assign to a very clever tool or machine, a computer. Now, I resist very strongly the idea that the brain is some form of a computer. It's not at all like a computer for a whole host of reasons I go into in this book. But it's true that the left hemisphere is a bit like the right hemisphere's personal computer in a certain respect, that the right hemisphere understands much more of what we would call experience. And it realizes that it needs to process certain things in a way that if it were to do that, it would lose its grasp of the whole picture. So it has, as it were, evolutionarily delegated a relatively limited resource that will deal with things in that way, and it's sent off to do that business. But like the computer, it doesn't understand what the data that are put in means. It doesn't understand what its output means, but it does actually do the business of crunching the numbers. And in a way, that is a rather crude image, but it is a fairly informative image about the relationship between the hemispheres. And what that means is that the left hemisphere is effectively abstracted from the world in the way that a computer program is. I sometimes use Korzybski's image of the map and the terrain, that the right hemisphere understands the terrain. The left hemisphere mistakes its map of the terrain for the terrain itself. And that seems to be where we're now living. We're living in a world where we have a theory about life, which is incredibly much simpler than the complexity of life itself that none of us can completely understand. And the theory has now displaced experience so badly that even when our theory is laughably, ludicrously out of touch with what our experience tells us, we nonetheless say, oh yes, this is right, this is the theory, we must go along with this. And that is happening in the big institutions of the West, which are falling prey to some very, very simple mistaken ideas.